debate rules had spelled out that no topics or questions will be shared in advance with campaigns or candidates. Now, Donald Trump has said that he would not participate in another presidential debate against Kamala Harris ahead of the November elections. Several polls show that Harris beat Trump in the debate held in Philadelphia earlier this week. Here's a closer look at why Trump says he won, and let's not debate it anymore.
Because we've done 2 debates and because they were successful, there will be no third debate.
2 nights after his dismal performance against Kamala Harris, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump ended speculation about debating the Democratic presidential nominee again. Meanwhile, the Harris team has been rooting for another presidential debate ever since some polls suggested that the incumbent vice president had won the debate.
Donald Trump and I had our debate. You watched it? Did you watch it? And look, I believe we owe it to have another debate. Right? We owe it to the voters.
Reports say that some people in Trump's team are concerned about his performance, and that is why they don't want another debate, although Trump seems to be telling a different story.
But she immediately called for a second debate, which means that she was like a prize fighter that lost a fight. We had 2 debates, though. I had a debate with crooked Joe Biden, right? And I had another debate with her.
Though Harris' campaign seems to have gotten a boost in the wake of the debate, the candidate is still wary, as debate victories don't guarantee election wins.
And look, we know ours will be a very tight race until the very end. We are the underdog. Let's be clear about that. We are the underdog. And so we have hard work ahead of us.
During the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton was judged as the winner of each of her debates with Trump, but it was he who was sworn in as the president. While Harris might have expanded her lead over Trump, according to some post-debate polls, there is a silver lining for the 78-year-old, as he still leads Harris in most polls when voters are asked about 2 of the key election issues, economy and immigration, solidifying the argument that the race to the Oval Office is far from over. Vishal Vivek reports for NDTV World Bureau Report.
We're now joined by former advisor to the Biden administration, Nish Acharya. Thanks very much, Nish, for joining us here. We'll take a closer look at all that's happening with the debate saga. Nish, some might say bad move by Trump to opt out of a debate. Of course, he could well be calling for a debate on Fox next week. We just never know with Trump. So let's look at the other side, the Kamala Harris side. Okay, great performance in the debate, but is that really a one-off? And she may have won the debate, but she seems to be really an evolving candidate, right? So we don't know enough about her policy, people say. So how much of a disadvantage really is Harris at this point without having a debate rematch?
So thank you for having me. I think she did an amazing job in the debate. I think she actually won on substance as well as on style. Not only keeping him on the defensive, but also answering certainly more of the policy questions than he did. I think it's too bad that he has declined to have another debate, simply because in the U.S. process, it goes on for a very long time. The system is set up so that you focus on your base voters early on during the nomination process, and then need to focus on the general election only from August through November. So we don't have a lot of time. And the more debates that we can have are better. So I wish he would say yes to another debate. Certainly, he's been a good debater. He was elected president and then only barely lost the second time. So I imagine his second debate will be better. But in terms of Harris as a candidate, I think, she is actually a quite strong candidate. She's not necessarily evolving in her positions as much as America is starting to spend some time learning about her positions and how she'll continue the work that the Biden-Harris administration did. And in that, she'll have more questions to answer as people get to know her. And a debate is a great way to answer those questions, particularly when she's put side by side with Donald Trump and his policy position.
Right, Anish, you've probably heard this before, and also a lot of people saying that perhaps the debate would help her better define herself. We saw some of that on Tuesday night, but given that this debate is likely not going to happen, a second debate, so what can she potentially do? Are we likely going to see perhaps, or would you recommend more one-on-one interviews that she could potentially do with TV stations? People want to see her really unscripted, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I think she needs to do more of that. I think there's going to be a couple of opportunities. You know, the two times that she has spoken to a national audience, one was the Democratic National Convention, and the second time was the debate. And in both times, she performed stellarly and really spoke about her own personal journey as well as her positions, as well as attacking Trump. And I think the two things that she really needs to do moving forward will be exactly what you said. First is to sit down with a diverse set of reporters, maybe some that are lifestyle focused, some that are political, some that are in the business press, because I think some of her business policies have gotten unfortunate negative attention and inaccurate negative attention. And so I think sitting down with specialty press is going to be important to tell her story, both politically as well as personally. And then the second thing I think is going to be to continue to be out there meeting voters. So, you know, being not just in the battleground states, but in some of the other states as well, really giving speeches, talking to voters, letting them get to know what she's doing. And of course, social media now is an important element of that. So talking to some of the influencers in different arenas and finding different ways to reach important audiences of undecided voters or voters who are not quite sure what the difference will be between the two parties. And if she can do that, you know, it looks like she's in a good position to win this.
Because she's very comfortable with social media influencers, very comfortable chatting with them. But why do you think that she's kind of shied away from doing more of those unscripted TV debates with, say, like you were saying, you know, specific targeted audiences, like say on business channels or other places? It's kind of a repeat of what we've what we've really seen with Biden as well, shying away from doing more of these one-on-one debates.
Yeah. So I think there's three reasons for that. The first is simply that she only became the nominee a month ago. And so there hasn't really been, you know, that leads into the second issue, which is that once President Biden decided to drop out of the race and she was the person that he supported, and therefore she got the nomination, there was the convention, there was the introduction to the people, the debate prep, and then the debate. So I don't think she's had a lot of time. And so I think that's the second reason. And the third reason is I think, you know, at least with the United States press, some of them tend to focus on the horse race or on the political side, and they don't actually serve as the best way for her to talk about herself or her position. Now, I think there are some great journalists in the United States who do ask serious questions, and my hope is that she will sit down with them and have more serious conversations along with the one she's done, but that also she'll reach out to other outlets, perhaps that are popular, and sit down, either do sit-down interviews or more videos or something to reach people where they are.
Okay, Nish, I'm going to ask you to take off your Democrat hat for a bit. So purely from a strategic perspective for Trump, you know, do you think the risk of another debate really outweighs the advantages? So best to put all of this negativity as far as the debate goes behind him as soon as possible. People's memories can be short-lived, as we know. We still have about 50 days till voting day. Any damage from the debate perhaps will be, you know, any fallout will be long forgotten. How politically sound is this move for Trump on refusing to debate again?
So I think it's really unfortunate, even not from a non-perspective. As I mentioned in the beginning, under the U.S. system, we don't have a lot of opportunity. You know, in India, there's the Prime Minister's question hour. There's other times when the parties debate. In the U.S. system, we don't have a lot of that with our leaders. And so I think it is always good, the more debates that they do, particularly because the general election is only August through November, first week in November. You're talking about less than 3 months. So I think even for Trump, Trump is a known quantity. Most Americans either love him or hate him. But having said that, there is a undecided middle who's trying to decide if they want to go back to the Trump years and what they believe was the economic policies. And then what do they want to stay with the Biden-Harris administration and all the amazing things that they've done as well. And so I think, even from a nonpartisan perspective, it is important, I think, for Trump to have that debate and stand by the policies that he may have, whether it's healthcare, immigration, other things, and define that. So I think, again, for both candidates, I think it's important, but for different reasons.
Nish, let's take a look at what Trump said about ABC being unfair and Harris getting questions in advance. Do you think that Trump has somewhat of a point there, if not going to the extent of Harris getting the questions in advance, but just by how the moderators handled the fact-checking perhaps? How fair do you think were the ABC hosts on debate night towards Trump?
Yeah, I think they were completely fair. I don't buy that argument. There's been a saying going on around TV, which is, a basketball analogy, which is don't blame the referee if you're not making your jump shots. And certainly Trump did not perform well and did not answer the questions. And so now they're trying to blame the moderators. I think the moderators actually, they did follow up with Kamala Harris as well about some of her questions, and just as much as they did with Trump. Trump did not answer the questions about what his border plan would be. He did not answer how he would end the war in Ukraine or end the war in Gaza. And so I think the idea that they were somehow tougher on him is just not true. He didn't answer questions any more or less than Kamala Harris did. And certainly I think the last I saw was that Trump got 5 more minutes of speaking time than Harris did. So this idea that the moderators favored Harris is, I think, reflective of the poor results for Trump of the debate, not of any real assessment of the moderators.
Talking about lies and misleading claims, let's take a quick look at some of what Harris said in the debate this week. Harris said that I made it very clear in 2020 I will not ban fracking, but if you go back really to 2020, she in fact did not say that. She never explicitly stated her position. She merely said Joe Biden will not end fracking. Or take, for example, the other statement that she made that, Trump left office with the worst unemployment rate since the Great Depression, but unemployment, in fact, had gone down when Trump left. Do you think that Harris managed to get away with some of those claims compared to Trump?
Unemployment was higher at the end of the Trump years because obviously we're in the middle of COVID. So I think, that's partially a political argument similar to the one about Harris. She did not come against fracking, but obviously the Biden-Harris administration has been very focused on climate change, and fracking is something that causes climate change. So I think that's the politics of it. I think, really speaking, what we have in the United States is that both fracking and the exploration of gas, exploration of oil, the energy economy is a very large sector. It is a very large sector in terms of employment. And so even though most Americans believe that climate change is a problem and most Americans want to transition to solar and wind and other clean sources, there's going to be a pathway to do that. It won't happen overnight, even though we need to do it faster. And so I think what Harris has been trying to say is that, look, we allowed more fracking under the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the signature climate change legislation of the last Congress and of the Biden-Harris administration, that as part of the transition, there'll be more fracking. There has been more fracking approved as we transition to a clean economy. So I think in policy and in practice, they have tried their best to balance, what needs to be done in the long term with what can be done immediately. And so the political reaction to that is what it is. The goal is to get away from that, but nobody's banning it either. And so I think the Republican response is what you'd expect to parsing those two things. similar to the unemployment numbers in the middle of COVID, which obviously was a global pandemic.
Right. Got it. Thanks very much indeed, former advisor to the Biden administration, Nish Acharya, joining us there. Thanks very much for your time. In other news now, the Republican Party having to deal with yet another controversy. Former US President Donald Trump marked the anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks with stops in New York City and Pennsylvania on Wednesday. However, his tributes were overshadowed by the presence there of far-right figure Laura Loomer. Loomer has a history of promoting conspiracy theories about the 9/11 attacks and posting anti-Muslim content on social media. Loomer was banned from Twitter, now X, for her inflammatory posts. She was then reinstated by Elon Musk, who himself has previously suggested that 9/11 attacks were an, quote, inside job, unquote. Now, according to reports, the United States is preparing to file criminal charges over Iran's alleged hack and leak attacks against Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The probe suggests that both Trump and the Biden-Harris campaigns were targeted by an online account with links to the Iranian government. Reports say that charges could be filed in just a few days. This comes a week after the US sanctioned Russian media executives on election meddling charges.
And we're going to make America great again. The reign of corrupt Washington establishment will be over and America will be a...
The US Justice Department is preparing to file criminal charges over Iran's alleged hack and leak attack against Donald Trump's presidential campaign. According to reports, the FBI probe has focused on email account identification only as Robert. The account contacted American reporters and shared campaign documents it falsely claimed to have obtained while working with the Trump campaign.
Great again. The reign of corrupt Washington establishment...
Investigation into the case has revealed that Robert was acting on behalf of the Iranian government in offering data files stolen from Trump's advisors' email accounts to news organizations. Criminal charges could be filed within a few days, according to reports. The probe says that it is not just the Trump campaign that has been targeted, as there was an attempted breach of the Biden-Harris campaign as well. Accusations of election meddling have been volleying across the globe for years. Just a few days ago, the US had charged and sanctioned Russian state media executives as it accused Moscow of a widespread campaign to interfere with the presidential election. The latest accusations highlight how deep these operations run. Vishal Vivek reports for NDTV World. Bureau Report.
Let's take a closer look at this story now. We're joined by cyber threat analyst Alexis Ahmad. Alexis, thanks very much for your time this morning. Let's take a deeper dive into what we just heard there. Given everything that's happening with the Israel-Gaza war, I don't think really we should be too surprised by this, right? Given Iran's support for Hamas with military aid and training. But what's the end game here, I'm wondering, for Iran? Most sympathy towards the Palestinian cause, so divisions here in the United States. What's your take?
Well, thank you for having me. I think a lot of this can be attributed to a dislike or a lack of favor for a potential Donald Trump presidency, given his stance or foreign policy in relation to Iran. And I think a lot of this or the activities that were performed were sort of part of a larger plan to try and disrupt the Republican presidential campaign. And one of these examples, based on the files that were leaked as a result of this hack, were or seemed to point towards that, by releasing a dossier on Donald Trump's vice presidential pick that was primarily aimed or geared to sort of shift the attention to, the vetting process or the lack thereof or therein of a process behind it. And from my perspective, this is something that, again, always repeats itself, whether it be, Russian state-backed threat actors, or now in this case Iranian threat actors. I think there seems to be a push, or the objective seems to be to cause chaos, or to disgruntle, harmony, if that makes sense.
Right. Talking about that dossier on J.D. Vance that the hackers, or this guy called Robert, sent to media outlets like Washington Times, New York Post, and Politico. That's one aspect of it. I know that we don't have too many other details. Are you hearing what else those emails said?
Well, the emails, again, based on what was revealed by Politico, it appears to be, or there appears to be a series of them that, again, we don't have any specifics of, but I would assume, based on, again, the reports released by Microsoft on the same, as well as Google's threat intelligence team, that they are primarily to do with the internal workings of the campaigns themselves. There were, as you mentioned, attempts to target, the Democratic campaign. However, it doesn't look like those were successful. So I would assume that the documents or files are really pertinent to the campaign itself, as opposed to sort of a wider scope.
Right, we're also joined by Jake Novak. He's a political analyst. He's also joining us live now, right here on US Election Watch. Thanks very much, Jake, for coming on the show. Jake, are we talking about here about what happened with those likely charges that are coming through with Iran, and the emails that went out to Politico, Washington Times, and the Washington Post and New York Times? Are you surprised by Iran really here stepping up their game as far as trying to disrupt the US elections go?
No, I'm not surprised at all. Iran has a tremendous amount riding on the result of this election. We can argue here in America about how there's not much difference sometimes between the candidates, but there can be no argument in Iran. Donald Trump is an almost 100% certainty will reimpose sanctions on Iran, will start to choke off the financial pipeline and cash flow to Iran if he's elected. That's not even in question. There's no doubt that that will happen. There are some other things that he's promised that certainly are in doubt, but that's not one of them. So Iran absolutely has a lot riding on this election, and it's more than just about an initial policy. There are many people in the Biden administration, in the State Department, holdovers from the Obama administration, who are absolutely sympathetic to Iran, and I believe there are some that are even working for Iran. So that could actually, now they may find some way to survive under a Trump administration, but of course their chances of surviving in office in whatever position they have in the bureaucracy would be much lower if Trump is elected. So I'm not surprised, and I think it's probably more extensive than we know, their efforts to try to eliminate him from the campaign.
Jake, I know details are still sketchy, but who is likely to be charged here? In the past, we've seen US officials name and shame, so to speak, hackers from China or Russia. So are there likely to be charges against people like far away from US shores, in Iran, right here in the United States? Any idea on what we should expect?
Yeah, I mean, the United States has already sanctioned a lot of the leaders, for example, the IRGC and some of the internal folks in the Iranian regime. One thing people need to understand about Iran really only produces one thing. The regime in Iran only produces one thing, and that is foreign proxy or foreign terror operations. That's their entire policy. That's why they're so desperate to save Hamas and Hezbollah, because if those proxy armies fail, then it's almost as if their entire regime's reason to exist fails. And so this is another part of their regime's, part of the same policy, which is to start terror throughout other parts of the world, attack other areas. That's why, for example, they will attack civilian populations in different countries when they can't effectively attack a military. For example, in Israel, that's why they targeted in Argentina 30 years ago the Jewish centers in Argentina, who were obviously less defended than the Israeli military. So they do stuff like this. This is their entire infrastructure. So I think you'll see leaders of the IRGC getting named. The United States does this all the time. We indict them here in the United States. We know it doesn't mean anything, but as far as actually getting them to a court of law, we don't expect that. But what it does is it gives the United States military and the United States intelligence services the legal groundwork so that they can start targeting them in different ways. And basically, we still have rules, even though it seems like we're just making them up as we go along. Before we go after someone, either in our intelligence services or in a commando raid or a drone strike, there has to be something on the law books that makes that legal. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to indict them in absentia. They're going to sanction them in absentia. And that will lead to, hopefully, some kind of action against them to stop them from any further attacks or plans to attack the United States.
Right, between the two here, Iran, and we've seen Russia as well. Last week, the US charged two employees of RT, a Russian state media company. They allegedly funneled $10 million to a US content creation company to put out those social media videos with messages favoring Russian interests. Really want to ask you, Alexis, and I'll come to Jake as well, who is the bigger problem here, Iran or for that matter, Russia?
Well, I think from my perspective, and having analyzed, previous attacks in previous election cycles, Iran's campaign, at least insofar as this leak is concerned or hack, seems to align very closely to what the GRU or FSB groups had done in 2016 with hacking into the DNC. And so if you actually study a timeline of events, it pretty much mirrors very closely to that campaign, as well as their objectives. So I think that there probably is some or a form of collusion between the two in terms of strategizing and maybe even coming up with a synthesis of techniques, if that makes sense.
Thanks very much. Absolutely run out of time here, Jake. We would have loved to come to you, but potentially next time on a similar topic. Thanks very much for your time there. That's Jake Novak and Alexis Emma joining us here on US Election Watch. Thanks for your company. It's a wrap.
Introducing the new U Facial Hair Remover from JML. Discreetly erase every single unwanted hair from your upper lip, cheeks and chin. And remove all types of hair instantly and painlessly, even delicate peach fuzz, for flawless makeup application. And for perfectly shaped brows, try the new U Eyebrow Shaper to instantly and painlessly sweep away unwanted hair with precision, leaving you with fabulous looking brows. For discreet and effective hair removal, you need new U. Only $14.99 from Asda, Boots, Morrisons, Tesco and jmldirect.com.
At Tesco Mobile, our deals are so good